what I feel that generally happening. Now, if you look at based on the research which have been done by many agencies in worldwide, of course in India, there are essentially 5 things which I actually look at. One is if you look at women professional, work-life balance, domestic versus your professional job. Pay is sometimes also disparity between men and women. Harassment, well, that's a term which has been misused quite often in many cases. Harassment, leading to sexual harassment and various other things. Career opportunities, whether how they can do. For example, I can tell you my wife, when she worked for IBM, she has to take a flexi, so she take a huge cotton salary. So your objective, your commitment, your career has to also balance. So those are the aspects you need to look at. Then of course, when you raise from young to you raise your children and career, so that's the 5th thing. So you have work-life balance, equal pay, harassment, career opportunities, children and career. So those are aspects probably one need to look at in the longer run. And if you look at, interestingly, developed nations, they feel that in the survey, they can't do this both the things together. Once they have job on their family, they dedicate complete family. In developing country, we still actually struggle, try to do both the things together. I think these are some of the trend which we see in coming days also happening. Now, what happening actually last 10 years, if you look at, or let's look at liberation in India, 1991 onwards, 30 years from now. So we call millennial women under the age of 30 are more optimistic, more challenging. They wanted to really jump in, take risks. So situation is a little more better compared to what we used to see 30 years ago and when we started our career for that matter. So therefore, the ground reality wanted to see how this is the trend is going to go in 10 to 15, 20 years. So this is one of the aspects. So with this, I would like to really thank all my colleagues, those who are joining to speak and share the knowledge. And I wish all success and for this webinar. And I would like everyone to participate. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Neha. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Mr. Prashant Kapila, Member FIDIC DNI and Vice President CEAI, to give a brief on DNI. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha. A very warm welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to this very pertinent webinar. I'd like to, at the outset, congratulate the Future Leaders Committee headed by Neha and her team for organizing this webinar and bringing this very important issue to the fore at CEAI. Today, I've been tasked to give a brief about the FIDIC Diversity and Inclusion Committee. At FIDIC, we have a committee, as I said, to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And it came about in 2018. And initially, in fact, I have the pleasure of having 2 of my founding colleagues, Jessica and Elisa here. And we were at the FIDIC conference in Berlin when the idea about women in consulting engineering was being discussed. And it was a combination of Michelle, Jessica, Jomana, Elisa, Hust, and myself. And we were sitting and talking about how do we raise the bar for women in consulting engineering? How do we do a concerted effort to see that that increases? And we spoke to a FIDIC board member about it. And we were soon came up with a task force. But the task force was not limited to just being about women and women in engineering. We came about the whole idea of diversity and inclusion. And diversity and inclusion is a much larger topic. It covers issues like gender, race, nationality, ethnicity, religious belief, and to ensure that there's no discrimination to any person on the basis of these basic human fundamentals, either at their workplace or in life in general. And the FIDIC task force was then converted into a full committee in 2019. And we are about 20 members on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. One of the tasks of the committee was to prepare a FIDIC's diversity and inclusion policy. And in fact, Elisa and myself were part of the subcommittee that initially prepared the first draft, which we shared with our colleagues. We've all then chipped in, and the policy has then been sent to the board. The FIDIC board has reviewed the diversity and inclusion policy and come back with certain comments, which have since been addressed. And we are hopeful for a very quick ratification of the diversity and inclusion policy from FIDIC. Over the years, we've seen women, especially in engineering, being limited to doing a lot of work out of the offices, doing design work and planning work. But more and more, we are now seeing women out there on the field at construction sites, in getting the work done, standing in the heat, be it at 50 degrees in an oil and gas plant in the middle of a desert, or overseeing concreting or tunneling in the middle of the night in the Himalayas. So I think women in engineering is something that is growing, and it's very encouraging to see that. Future leaders, it's encouraging to see young women coming forward and working. And I think we need to be very mindful that diversity and inclusion is something which is important for every firm, every association to keep in mind while formulating its growth progress and formulating its chart and its journey forward. We at CEI were very fortunate to have been headed by a lady. We had Ms. Sayona Phillips as our president for a term of 2 years. In fact, she was our president when we were at the FIDIC conference in Berlin. And today we have amongst us two of my colleagues, Jessica and Elisa from the Diversity Inclusion Committee, who will be talking about their experiences and their challenges. And we have Paramita and Harshita from giving the perspective on the Indian scenario and how they've had it so far. I look forward to hearing from you ladies and hearing about your challenges, your journeys, and more importantly, your recommendations and your thoughts on how we in the consulting engineering fraternity can make a better workplace so that women like you can come forward and deliver it to the best of your abilities. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you, sir. So, dear friends, without any further ado, let's maximize our work impact by listening to the young women leaders. Let's welcome our first speaker, Dr. Elisa, an architect and urban planner working as international consultant in sustainable urban development for multilateral development agencies, local government, municipalities, and NGOs. Having experience in more than 20 countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. In 2018, Elisa received the Global Award for Exceptional Women of Excellence from the Women Economic Forum and EFCA Young Professional Award from the European Federation of Engineering Consultancy Association. Let's hear from Elisa how women as professionals and non-professionals play a key role in building more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive cities. Over to you, Elisa.
Thank you very much, Neha, and thank you all for the invitation. I'm honored to be here. I will share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen, Neha?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think it's very important to talk about the 3 Cs, career, challenge, and commitment, because for me, to be an architect and urban planner, it means to work with a strong commitment in the society. I think for that reason, I'm part of the, as Prashant was presenting, of the Diversity Inclusion Committee of the Green Deal Committee of EFCA, that means also social inclusion. And I work with in 2 levels. So I try to work like in the global scale and the local scale in my country, Italy, to support communities and build sustainable cities. So why I would like to talk about women professional, non-professional as key actors, because we all know that we have a global sustainable development goal. So, and achieving gender equality and empower women and girls, it's part of it. So it's a global common goal to work on it. And no matter what, it's the country, the religion, the place, or the career, we have to work on it. And there is a big discussion all around the world, I can assure you. So from the UN Habitat, World Bank, local governments and local communities working on it. So we are, the good news is that we are in a good way, but we have to do a lot of work. So why it's very important for me, as Neha said, I'm an urban planner, so I try to work with in team and multidisciplinary team to develop more sustainable cities. And I can assure you that in each continent I work at, women play a key role because they are the backbone, as you said, of all activities and relationships in cities that take place in urban space, and that they are also often leaders. These photos I took in Sierra Leone, in a very, very small island, and she's the mayor of this island, Banana Island, and she managed many communities and all the problems of the different islands, and she's recognized as that. But you have a lot of women that work and live the cities, and that they are not recognized at all. So they are invisible, and they have work, family, so a lot of things to manage, but they have not space, or they are not a city that can support them to make their career. So I think that it's important to say that the woman usually has to adapt and fight for space, because I saw that in Africa and Europe, in Latin America, also in my same city, Rome. There is no space when you are a woman and you want to go and achieve your dreams in your career, to leave maybe your children or your elders. And so you have to combine, as we said already, a lot of space, and a lot of needs, and you don't have a cities that can support you. So I think it's very important to say that we have to change the model, because we have a model of cities that it's based mainly on individuals. It's not designed around the needs of the relationship of communities. So we need to change a model to make more equitable and inclusive cities, to respond to the needs of women and all kind of communities and all kind of diversity Prashant was describing before. So for me, it's very important to empower professional and non-professional, and to say that we have to work together. This is the important concept. As women professional together, but also with non-professionals, so inhabitants, local leaders, women workers of any kind, to discuss with them, to listen them, and so to plan the city according to their needs and our needs, because we have to build a dialogue on the cities based on listening to everyone's needs. So these photos, for example, is very important for me because it means a participatory way to plan the cities, including women and all communities. Building dialogue, what does it mean? It means create a cooperation. So this cooperation can ensure a durability of each action we will plan. These photos for me are very important. It's always in Sierra Leone, in the Bont Island, and we were there for urban projects with the World Bank. And we were doing a stakeholder meeting with all the leaders and the mayors, and they said, no, women have to stay outdoor. So we had official stakeholder meetings with the mayor and only men inside the room. And I said with the other fantastic woman from the World Bank, Louise, no, we have to meet women because they are the backbone of this city. So we organized a second round discussion table with them, and we discovered how we need to work on the city in this specific session. So, and I think it's very important to say that the 3S you mentioned, so commitment, careers, and challenge for us as engineers and planners, also in this post-COVID era, that it will be a very difficult era for our urban life. It's an important challenge for us, this combination, and as women professional, we can give an important input on that and change and really build inclusive cities together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elisa. I request the audience to key in their questions in the chat box for the Q&A to be taken after all speakers talk. Thank you. I now request our next speaker, Harshita Jain, a young entrepreneur working as Director Business Development in Consulting Engineers Group, CEG, a leading global consulting. Under her leadership, CEG achieved year-on-year growth of 20% since 2014. With her pure perseverance, she has created a success story and has been more than successful in making a mark in infrastructure world. Welcome, Harshita. We are eager to listen from you how women can break the barriers in engineering. Over to you.
Thank you, Neha. I'll just share my screen. So is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I feel honored to be a part of this great initiative by CAI, promoting the young future leaders. I'm Harshita Jain, and it is my honor to share my thoughts about the challenges, the commitments, and the career of a woman in the engineering sector in the Indian context. India is a country which is obsessed with engineers. Around 8 of the 10 students passing out of schools opt for engineering degrees in various subjects. India has the largest number of engineers as well as the largest number of engineering education institutes and infrastructure in the world. We're aware of the number of reasons why students choose engineering, like diverse career options and high salary, etc. But in the Indian context, another important reason which motivates people to take up engineering is the social stature that is gained. With most parents still funding the education of students, they wish for their child to take engineering since it is looked as a stable and respectable career choice. India is annually producing more than 1 million engineering graduates every year. However, despite all the benefits of engineering and the massive infrastructure in place, it is worrisome how women are being represented in this sector. As per the study conducted by MHRD in 2019, it was found that women representation has wavered around 30% for the last few years of the total students enrolled in the engineering, and has been on a marginally declining trend since. If we specifically talk about the IITs, the premier institute of engineering in the country, women only make up 8% of the student strength. It becomes very evident that India would have to work very hard to introduce the gender parity in the engineering sector. The biggest question we really need to ponder is why such disproportionate numbers. The reasons can range from peer pressure to lack of role models and support from parents as well as teachers to a general misconception what engineering careers look like in the real world. A society in which a woman cannot realize their full potential loses out on a significant prospects for innovation, economic growth, and job creation. For instance, a recent study showed that in India, if we take measures to close the gender gap, it could lead to a 6.8% gain in the GDP as compared to the current business as usual scenario. So even with such growth by inclusion of more women in engineering, why women are shying away to make their careers in this? The current situation of girls choosing engineering at a graduate level does seem dire. However, the actual problem we should really focus on is the challenges faced by the women in India seem to take place after graduation. Metaphorically, the current situation of women engineers in India is like a leaking bucket. The engineering field in India, or the bucket is filling up with the fresh women engineers. However, many reasons are restricting the women to make a career in this. Around 30% of the women engineers leave their jobs in the first 5 years of their careers. The unemployment rate for women in engineering degrees is about 40%, 5 times more than the rate of men. And hence, we need to ask, why does those who does in fact take up engineering, why don't they stay in this profession? Why is it that India is not able to retain the women in engineering as a career option? I'm sure you all must be aware of this photograph. This was a very viral post shared by Mr. Anand Mahindra, which rightly depicts the sad reality of our society. While the male professionals usually have a clear path to reach their targets, a female's path is filled with several obstacles. These obstacles that become a conflict or challenges for women to keep working can range from leadership, gender discrimination, harassment, work-life balance, and support. The various bias prevalent in our society, the women are constantly subjected to the prove it again bias in all areas. We have to give more evidence of our competence to gain the same recognition as our male colleagues. Women all over the world are faced with this bias where women feel that their mistakes are noticed more and remembered longer when their ideas are ignored and their successes are attributed to luck rather than skill. Another bias that women face is the maternal wall bias due to motherhood. In a workplace, being a mother may trigger strongly negative assumptions about a woman's competence and commitment. Often people assume that mothers are less committed to their jobs because they should have a greater focus on their families. On the flip side, if a mother tries to show her commitment at work, she might be perceived as a bad mother. There is a paradox in the psychological battle between the genders. Intellectually, men may want their wives to be better educated. Psychologically, they are unable to cope with it, and it's still a mother-at-home model they think about. We generally hear the term that engineering is a man's domain. The other side of this coin represents the predominant social norms which expect women to first and foremost look after their home. In fact, many Indian women often do assume greater responsibility at home and spend on an average 5 times as much time than men on housework and other unpaid activities. As a subconscious decisions, in our childhood, we are given dolls to play with while the boys are given building blocks. We are reinforced with a deep-rooted belief that since an early age, that building something is a boys' club. In order to increase the women's participation in engineering, we would need to start consciously taking decisions which do not discriminate between the girls and the boys right from childhood. As juggling between both home and career can be challenging, family support is considered as a core success for the Indian female engineers. Some women interviewed for a study explained that their families had a modern outlook or they understood her passion, and often mentioned that I was lucky, thereby implicitly suggesting that such supportive families are not a norm in this society. Out of the total women who stick around to continue their careers in engineering, hardly some of them reach top positions in a company. Over the past decade, scientific studies have consistently shown that on the most of the key traits that make leaders effective, women tend to outperform men. Like, for example, humility, self-awareness, self-control, morality, sensitivity, social skills, etc., are all more likely to be found in women rather than men. This lack of female leaders can be attributed to the fact that we live in a sham meritocracy, where we pretend to pick the best person for each job, while simply picking those we prefer. It is also discouraging as a young professional that there aren't many women in the leadership positions. This paints a picture that a woman in the industry don't make it. The lack of representation at senior levels mean there are no examples for the women in the junior positions to follow. Nonetheless, the situation is changing, and it is now widely accepted that we must ensure that our workforce is diverse, inclusive, and representative of the society if we are to tackle the built environment challenges of the future. We're now witnessing a changing environment, and Indian women engineers are leaving a mark all around the globe. To name a few, we have Priya Subramaniam, VP of iPhone, Nandini Ramani, VP Engineering Twitter, Anjali Joshi, VP of Product Management Google, Komal Mangtani, Head of Data Intelligence Uber, and Aparna Ramani, Director of Engineering Facebook, and many more are all an example that the sky is the limit once we are committed to our goals, and it is possible to crack through the conformity. Sharing their success stories in social media and traditional media provides an inspiration and proof that engineering and leadership can be a woman's world too, and therefore strengthen the confidence of the young female engineers. Overcoming the barriers is a matter of grit and passion of the individual women themselves. We really need to work to harness the full potential of the women. Let's make a few commitments to ourselves to help the women seize the engineering opportunities and their success. Firstly, it is very crucial to provide equal access to education and encourage women to use their acquired skill by joining the workforce. Policies aimed at including more women in the senior and leadership positions are needed and will help women gain more experience and knowledge. Secondly, women engineers need more support from their families and social circles to pursue their engineering ambitions. Household and care duties should not be understood as a woman's sole responsibility. Thirdly, a more inclusive and a non-discriminatory and safe work environments are needed to help retain the qualified women, especially in the tech sector. Measures to improve the safety at public spaces are necessary so that women can commute between their homes and offices without the mental load of always having to worry about their security. Fourthly, the women need to be their own advocates, because even if we have a great mentor and a great support system, we need to remember that no one can stand up for ourselves better than ourselves. Women need to learn how to verbalize what they need and what they deserve. And lastly, the awareness for the unconscious biases and how they disadvantage the women engineers needs to be raised. However, as changes in the mindsets take time, the women engineers currently need to deal with the negative attitudes by being conscious about the bias themselves while finding ways to minimize it. I would like to conclude by thanking CAI for celebrating the accomplishments of women engineers through this webinar and raising the awareness of the engineering profession so the girls can take an interest in engineering at a young age. Despite the disproportionate numbers of women in engineering profession, it is a great time for women to get involved in this sector. Our world is going through a monumental shift and people are opening up and willing to have those tough conversations about diversity and inclusion. Companies are more receptive to improvements and women engineers and technologists are feeling hopeful that things are getting better. I would just like to conclude by saying it is not engineering that discriminates between the males and the females. It is us as a society which discriminates. The question that women engineers should ask is not who is going to let me, but who is going to stop me. Thank you. Over to you, Neha.
Neha?
Thank you, Harshita. We now move on to the next speaker, Paramita Ganguly, having total of 14 years of experience in power industry, currently working with Tata Consulting Engineers as Senior Manager, Instrumentation and Control. Let's get tips and tricks from Paramita, how women can reach the top of organization chart. Over to you, Paramita.
Thank you, Neha, and hello, everybody. It's an honor and privilege to be here today addressing a very promising group of future women leaders. And the journey so far has not been easy for most of us. But let us all start by agreeing that we are lucky to have grown in an environment where we could make choices for ourselves, which probably our mothers and grandmothers could not. Now, when it comes to the acceptance of women in the industrial context, the statistics are not very encouraging. What we see is that in the middle order, we have around 40 to 45% women managers. But as we climb up the corporate ladder, the numbers drastically decrease to 13 to 15%, and this is across the globe and across the industries. Even in the so-called women-centric industries like cosmetics or hospitality, the numbers are hardly 20%. Now, I don't want to be judgmental at all, and I don't have answers to all the questions. And I know there are women who need to be at home because there are situations which demand their complete presence there. And it is perfectly okay for them to make those decisions. But my talk today is for those who have chosen to be on the career path. There's a lot of buzz and noise going around how to train the women workforce, how to make them fit for the industrial requirement. And you see, this very thought comes from the core mindset that there is something wrong with the existing women workforce. And this is one of the reasons for those very disappointing numbers of women managers that we have at the top level. Today, I don't want to harp upon how the society or the industry should change, adapt, or evolve to make it more inclusive for the women, but rather I would like to share my thoughts on how we ourselves can make such changes in our way of work and attitude so that we can climb those final steps of the corporate ladder. First, let us start accepting and acknowledging our achievements as easily we have been sharing them in the past. It's time to get used to the I word. Yes, I have worked hard for this project and gained a good customer feedback. I deserve to be in this position because I have the required qualification and capability. Yes, we have to project for our team too, and that is what which has brought us here till date. But from here on, we have to remember that projection for ourselves has to be very, very important. Now let us talk about some of the characteristics which makes a woman likable in the society. Caring, sharing, helping, forgiving. And what are some of the characteristics of a great leader? Go-getter, aggressive, decisive, optimistic. And you see, these two sets of characteristics are in contradiction to each other. So what I would say is that success and likability is positively correlated for men and negatively for women. And this was very beautifully demonstrated by a professor in Columbia University. What he did was he gave two sets of case study to two groups of students. The only change made in the case study was the name of the corporate leader. One was Heidi, a lady, and the other was Howard, a man. So after studying, when the groups came back with the analysis, whereas everyone agreed that both the leaders were equally competent and successful, everyone liked Howard. They wanted to work with him, collaborate with him, but they were not so sure about Heidi. She's too political, too tough, aggressive. And you see, this is the conflict. And maybe that's why we'll have to tell our daughters at some point that there will be sacrifices which they will have to make, which their brothers won't. And this is so much more the reason to be at our center stage and keep our hands raised for each and every opportunity that comes our way. Next, when it comes to the working style, I have seen that women have a tendency to make minute detailing of all the work. But as leaders, what we need to do is we need to delegate and work towards collaboration. We have to collaborate with our customers so that we can gain their confidence. We have to collaborate with the juniors so we get the right set of skilled people in our team. We have to collaborate with the peers and our seniors. We have to have a mentor for ourselves who can put us forward when the opportunity arises. Now, collaboration at home is equally important. All of us would have come across this situation once or more. When we have to travel, there has to be somebody at home who has to take care of our kids or of the household. In my case, it's my husband. And you will be asked with a lot of questions around, like, how is he going to manage it? It must be very difficult for your husband to do it. He's doing a great job. And these questions won't be asked if it's the other way around. But mind you, it is not that always people are trying to be vicious at you. It's because of the fact that statistics shows that in 80% of the cases, the primary caretaker of a house is a woman. And there is the other extreme situation too. I have seen when kids are being accompanied to birthday parties by their dads. The other parents who are majorly women, the moms, don't include the dad in their conversation. So he feels uncomfortable, awkward. And these are the small things around us which creates a discriminating environment. When it comes to negotiation, women are great negotiators for others, for the company, for the project. But when it comes to negotiating for themselves, they take a laid-back attitude. And this is what we need to change. Finally, I would request all those women there to not leave their seat unless it is very much required. What happens is we go for a maternity leave for 6 months, another some extra 3-4 months, and then we come back after 1.5 years or 2 years. What we see is that the people who are behind us in the career ladder, they have climbed up. And believe me, when you come back leaving a 6-month-year-old at home, your job really needs to be rewarding and inspiring. So if you have not taken an opportunity of promotion before your maternity leave because you wanted to go for an early maternity leave, you may regret it later. I know maternity leave and all other leaves are very important. They are for our convenience, but please take them as per the requirement and at the right time, as and when required. And we have a tendency, as soon as we start thinking of our family, we start to plan when we have to quit the job. So please don't do that. Keep your feet on the gas pedal till the last moment and don't leave your seat unless and until it is very much required. I really don't know when the numbers at the top are going to improve, but I feel a world where half of the countries or half of the industries were led by women will be a better place. This is because of the very fact that women bring in some unique, distinct characters to the society, which will be equally valuable in the industrial context too. What I dream is that my son should have the flexibility to choose to be a full-time working parent or a be-at-home parent without being criticized or judged, and the daughters will be both successfully and liked for the achievements they make. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, Neha.
Thank you, Paramita. Now moving on to the last speaker of the day, Jessica Ranchin, a lead engineer of developments at Bosch Projects, a consulting engineering firm in Durban, South Africa. She currently serves as an executive committee member of FIDIC Africa, a member of FIDIC's Diversity and Inclusivities Committee, a member of the FIDIC Future Leader Council, and chairperson of Consulting Engineers South Africa Gender Diversity Forum. Let's see what Jessica has to say on strengthening the pipeline of women professionals in engineering. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you very much, Neha. I'm just going to share my screen. A very good afternoon to everyone. Our hosts, Consulting Engineers Association of India, my fellow panelists, and our valued attendees. It's really a pleasure to be here and an incredible honor to be on this webinar on raising the bar for women professionals. As a mom to a 2-year-old son, I often watch and wonder as he explores and figures out things for himself. And his bravery makes me so anxious. But his inquisitive mind and his fiery spirit makes me urge him onto the next big thing that he wants to tackle. But I often wonder if I would parent differently if I were not an engineer and if I were raising a daughter based on the unconscious biases that exist in the world and also those that I've experienced, and also watching the women engineers around me. We often think that in order to change the world, we need to do some grand gesture or a magnificent feat that changes the way the world will remember us. But today, if I can change some of the biases that we carry, that men carry, or even to empower another woman to be the best version of herself, I would have accomplished something really great. If the world were a village of 100 people, 52 of those would be women. And according to a 2020 World Economic Forum survey, based on the current trends and from the speakers before me, women will have achieved economic equality in equalizing the pay gap in 257 years' time. And despite study after study confirming that empowering women in the workplace isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing for business because it improves profitability, a better return on investment, and an increased innovation when women are empowered into senior leadership positions. Yet we still see many men hovering on the leaderboard. And can we wait until the year 2278 before we see equal pay for women? We've also talked about the engineering pipeline, the engineering bucket of skills. And this refers to the pool of potential engineers that exist and how we can get them and retain them in the engineering industry. And whilst we're seeing large numbers of unemployed graduates and experienced professionals, it's very difficult to get freely available information on women engineers. But what's very useful to see is that post-COVID economic recovery, infrastructure is set to be one of the big areas that we'll see growth in. I'd like to demonstrate a point around professional engineers and the small percentage of women that are represented in the space. This is statistics from South Africa, and you'll see that only 5% of professionally registered professionals are actually women. And when we look at the equivalent of the Consulting Engineers Association of India's counterpart in South Africa, that's CISA, only 11% of top management in consulting firms are women, and only 18% of senior management are women. So we often have to ask ourselves, how effective is an executive board that does not represent its constituents, and what impact that will have on the workplace. And everyone has a different opinion and an answer on what causes this leaky pipeline. Harshita talked about leaky bucket from school and into the C-suite. And we've talked at length on many different platforms about how to deal with it. And whilst the solutions are long-term, they're complex, and they require intervention from many stakeholders, there are a number of things that we can each do in our personal capacity to be able to plug the holes in this leaky pipeline, and to have a profession and a sector that better represents the demographics of our country, the demographics of the world, and also to harness the benefit of women in engineering. We've heard that there isn't enough female talent, and that women engineers, we've heard the stories about women engineers not wanting to stay in employment when you employ them in your firm, that women in engineering are not built to last, and all of those types of myths. And I'd like to share an idea with you. I want to tell you a story. I actually read an article called "The River on the Bridge Choluteca." It was written for Business World in April 2020. And this author talked about Choluteca in the Honduras in Central America. And it was very susceptible to storms and hurricanes. And in 1996, they decided to build a 484-meter long bridge over this river. And a Japanese firm built this bridge to withstand the powerful forces of nature. It was marvelous. But in October of 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit the Honduras, and rainfall, the equivalent of 6 months worth of rainfall, was experienced in just 4 days. And devastation followed. There were 7,000 lives that were lost, and all the bridges were destroyed except this one. And this new bridge was unaffected, and it was built to last. And that can be a good thing. But in the case of the engineering pipeline for women, let's see if that's so. So I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, and we'll come back to it when I'm done. I'd like for this next part of my share to be interactive. And I'd like for you to keep a mental note and also engage with us in the chat box on how unconscious biases have affected you personally or other women you know. And for the men in attendance to be honest about some of the decisions you've made when you realize that they've been driven by unconscious bias. So by definition, unconscious bias is defined as prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor of or against one thing or one group as opposed to another. And in that way, it's usually considered unfair. It's suggested that unconscious bias occurs automatically as the brain makes quick judgments based on past experiences and backgrounds. And as a result of unconscious biases, certain people benefit and other people are penalized. And if these biases drive many of the factors that affect the engineering pipeline, think about how we can undo such things. And remember, we're keeping score on whether you've been affected or whether you've seen people be affected by these types of these biases. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these because the previous speakers have shared really well. So we talked about the glass ceiling, which acts as a barrier to women's growth. We talk about the glass elevator, which is the phenomenon. It's actually a mystery by which men progress much faster in female-dominated professions. The glass cliff, that's when women are given an opportunity to lead at the point when the risk of failure is the highest. There's the motherhood penalty that we talked about, and that there's the perception that women will just tap out of the workforce and become slack as a result of children. And what's even more important is to also consider during this period, pandemic period, the impact of the gender impact of remote working, the gender impact of job losses, and also the penalty of the way in which things operate. Then there's the potential versus the performance. So that's where men are promoted on their future potential, whilst women are promoted on their past performance. And then there's the likability factor. We talked about the correlation between positive and negative likability. And then there's the queen bee syndrome, which is where some women in leadership that consider their title and status as a culmination of personal struggle, and those who don't reach out and support other women. We can discuss later on in the discussion around how many of these unconscious biases you've seen coming into your life. There's many more issues that are unconscious biases that also that we need to take into account. And those things are things such as the work-life balance. That's this elusive system that women are expected to achieve and to prove that she can and does have it all in every facet of life. And this is coupled with the challenges around flexible work hours, around access to childcare, the sufficiency of maternity leave, for instance. There's also the convergence of women's biological and professional clocks and the role of a mother as mothers and wives, and at a time where the demands of leadership positions also sometimes puts you at a disadvantage in achieving and attaining senior leadership positions without a real fight. There's also the ideas around career development and entrepreneurship opportunities that often accompanies a man's predominance in positions of organizational power. And coupled with very well-established professional and social networks that often provide greater access to men than to women. And most women do not have access to this type of professional support. So we need to ask ourselves, if we want to level the playing fields, how can we create these complementary systems that support men and women? And the unintended consequences of COVID-19 that's brought on the new normal. And for us to realistically ask, when our children are sick and they're at home, which gender is most expected to be able to tap out of the workforce to be able to deal with this? And in modern homes and in modern families and modern marriages, we do see a changing dynamic between men and women, but we really need to be able to normalize these things. And then there's sexual harassment and gender-based violence that's plagued our societies, it's plagued our workplaces. And for us to be able to think about particularly what the type of legacy we're leaving for our future generation, and to be able to change that narrative. And if we're in such an unbalanced equation, we keep asking ourselves, why are we fighting for empowerment? And what we need to be able to think about is that gender inequality and unconscious biases is often fueled by a scarcity mindset. And it's because we feel threatened by each other. Men feel threatened by women, women feel threatened by men, women feel threatened by other women. And those things, for us to be able to understand and move forward, it's for us to understand that we're not getting into a race, and that it doesn't mean that the inequalities that exist will organically correct themselves. It's for us to be able to see how we can work together. So I believe in something, I believe in the concept of women mentoring women, where we foster professional networks, where we enhance leadership that goes both ways, where we create opportunities for other women, and where we encourage entrepreneurship and volunteerism to be able to do exactly that. And the other thing is that it's really because it is the right thing to do. There is also another concept that I'd like to share and promote today, which is men mentoring women. And we know that we've talked a lot about the imbalances that exist, but I have been the product of being mentored by men in the industry, men in my life. And it really is important for us to be able to take every moment as a teachable moment, for us to be able to embrace our roles, not just as engineers, but as wives, as mothers, as friends, as change makers, because that's really the way in which we're going to see these mentoring and sponsorship relationships in the workplace changing. So you remember I talked about the Choluteca Bridge, and after everything we've discussed today, would you still like to be this bridge built to last? So let's just recap about this bridge. So although the bridge remained unaffected by the hurricane, everything else around it was swept away when the river changed its course. So while the bridge survived these extreme conditions and it survived the hurricane, it became a bridge over nothing, a bridge to nowhere. And although this is a 22-year-old story, its applicability has never been more apt. Our world is changing at an unimaginable pace, and drawing a parallel of the Choluteca Bridge to what can happen to us, to our lives, to our careers, to gender balance and business. And as the world transforms, we need to be able to adapt to change. And this relates to our skills, our experience, and whether or not we will become redundant, such as many things that we've seen in recent history. There's an MIT professor, her name is Sheila Windall, that says she was the first female secretary of the Air Force. And she said, if women don't belong in engineering, then engineering as a profession is irrelevant to the needs of our society. If engineering doesn't make welcome space for them and embrace women for their wonderful qualities, then engineering will become marginalized as other fields expand their turf to seek and create a place for more women. So just with regard to that, to the bridge analogy that was articulated so well, that we often get so focused on creating the best solution to a given problem that we often lose sight of the fact that sometimes the problem itself might change. So with the bridge analogy, do you want to be built to last or built to adapt? We need to be able to ask ourselves, how we will achieve that, and who will be our partners in being able to do this. I've just shared with you something that I call Jesh's 10 lessons, and it's something that I will share on my social media, and it has a write-up that goes with each of the lessons. And I really do believe that this is a topic that has a lot of merit for us to be able to unpack. We've really just scratched the surface. So I thank you for allowing me to share and look forward to engaging with you in the Q&As. So over to you, Neha. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you all the speakers for such a motivating and inspiring talk. We now move on to the question and answer session, which will really act as a topping on the cake to get more tips and trips. So I request the audience to please drop in their questions in the Q&A session. So here comes the first question for Harshita. Would the change in top management allow the vendors to work in this situation and help them find out the right set of people and talk to the candidates in a polite way and explain and take it forward?
So Neha, the change in top management, if I think the females are more inclusive, are more in the top management of any company, then yes, it would definitely bring a very much change in how the company is being run, because the women are pre-designed to be more receptive to the others. We are more morally and socially acceptable. We have a different the social skills that we have, and we have definitely brings a change about it. So yes, I think the top management, in the changes in the top management, would definitely bring about a change in the whole ecosystem of a company, how it's being run and how we are looking at a situation.
Thank you, Harshita. Hope the question is answered. Moving on to the next question, which is for Dr. Elisa. What advice you would like to give to the next generation female leaders, and what one leadership lesson that you would like to share from your career?
Thank you, Neha, for the question. I think it's very important to work both on your simultaneously on your hard skills. So study always and to grow technically, and your soft skills. So on ability to talk, to listen, and to cooperate with people. I think this is very important for us, for our career. I think also to speak, because a lot of women are not used to speak in many space, in many culture. Woman speaks only when a man asks to speak, and this thing I tested all around the world. So try to be active and an actor of an active part of debates, and be courageous always. I think also you have to take always a vision with you. So for me, it was always, my vision was always how I can help people being an architect and managing big projects, so to change cities and so to have an impact, a social impact on life of inhabitants. This was my vision. So I studied architecture, and I tried always to adapt my career to that vision. It was very hard. Yes, it was very hard. Also because I didn't told a lot about my personal experience, but I'm from Italy, I'm from Europe, and it's not so different, my country, from other countries of Africa, Asia, in terms of gender and in terms of issue for as a young woman professional. So I always tried to be patient, perseverant, and flexible, because also you have to change maybe sometimes your path to come back after to the way. So my advice is always concentrate on your vision, on your dream, but adapting to the way and trying to be always an actor of change. As Jessica said, it's important to also interact and be mentor and find your mentor. I have the same experience with both women and men as mentor, and I'm trying to do the same. I have my own NGO with women architects. I founded 10 years ago. We are more or less 15 young women, young more or less now, but I think it's very important to support other women. Thanks.
Thank you, Elisa, for such an insightful answer. Here comes this next question, which is for Paramita Ganguly. What's the most important risk or challenge you took, and why? Have you ever had a reason to think that you have chosen a wrong career, and why?
I would like to replace the word risk with challenge. Challenges makes us stronger. The most important challenge, I would say, in terms of career would have been leaving my 2-year-old at home and going for a deputation for around 2 months. But that all these challenges have made me stronger and shaped my career in a better way, in a positive way. And my family has also accepted me in the way it is. I think it would be sad that if I shy away from challenges, and the fear of failure should not stop us from trying. So far, I do not regret my career choices at all. I didn't start with a very big organization, but I have learned from all my employers, and the working with TC has been great so far very great for the last 9 years. And I think I have been able to carve a path for myself in TC, and I really look forward towards it. So challenges are important. They are not risk, and they have to be taken.
Thank you, Paramita, for such a positive reply. The next question here is again for Harshita. Don't we need to hire more women as fresher in order to see the capabilities? Because there are very few women civil engineers in the industry due to less opportunities given to them. And what is the take of consultancies on this?
I think, yes, there is a disparity between how the consultancies take on this fresh civil engineer, girl civil engineers. I, for one, can answer. I am a child of all civil engineers, where my mother and my elder sister are also civil engineers. And so, yes, there's a disparity in the consultancies also, but I, for one, try to give opportunities to the young female engineers. And it is, I'm very proud to say that in CEG, at least, I have tried to inculcate more female civil engineers. As the current scenario in all the consultancies, since it's more of a construction job, the girls themselves are not coming forward to be a part of this. So at first we need to get at the grassroots level that, you know, the construction industry is a good industry for girls. I, for one, can vouch for it because I am doing this in this profession for the last 7 years, and I've seen my mother and my sister work in this. It's a very good industry to be in, but this is not the real picture that is being painted to all the girls, young girls out there. So there are very few civil engineers who actually apply to us, but we do try to take on as many as we can in this industry. So I hope I have answered the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Harshita. Moving on to the next question, which is for Jessica. How do we move forward when everyone is telling that the idea won't work? And as a female leader, what has been the most significant barrier in your career?
Thank you for the question, Neha. So on the first question, I think that you'll always have people who tell you that your idea won't work. But you need to be able to ask yourself 2 questions on any type of obstacle. And the one is, where is the negativity coming from? So is it coming from a place of teaching and mentorship? So is someone telling you that something won't work because practically your thinking is flawed or your decision-making is skewed? Or the second could come from a place of ego, in the sense that someone's trying to undermine your authority. And being able to understand where someone's coming from with tackling allows you to be able to see whether you can use that negativity to enhance your answer and enhance your solution, or to be able to dismiss it. And I think that having that discernment is something that's very important. The second one around the most significant barrier for me, very similar to Parmita, I would say that making the transition back into the workplace after maternity leave was the most difficult period for me. I limited my maternity leave down to 4 months so that I wasn't away from the workplace. But there's a lot that changes for you once you've had a child, and to be able to balance that side of your life, because you love both things so much, your personal life and you love your career as much. But being able to make that transition, I think it also depends. It was difficult for me because I found it difficult to step back into projects and to get back into my team, because so much changes so fast in engineering. But I think that, as Parmita also said, having a supportive environment within which you work and creating that enabling environment was really something that helped me get over that. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Jessica. Here comes the other questions, which is for both Parmita and Harshita. What is the difference of working in a government sector or private sector?
Yeah, I would say that I don't have a real experience in working in a government sector, but what I can foresee and anticipate is in a government sector, it would be a very routine and a planned progress which you can make, which will be definitive, and you can foresee it probably every 3 years or 4 years you're getting a promotion, or your salary hikes are within that limit, 8%. But in the private sector, the horizon of your growth would increase or decrease based on your perspective and your attitude towards work in many folds. You can climb up or go down as per your requirement in a broader spectrum. And if you look at the attitude of the people, I would say, being humans, we all are same. It doesn't change whether you are in a government sector or private sector, the human attitude will still be the same, but there will be some governing laws in every sector, I think, which the organization has to respect and the individuals themselves have to respect, which will be governing both these sectors.
Thank you, Paramita. I request Harshita to also add on to it.
Yes, so I agree with what Pramita has said. I would just like to add working in the government sector is a bit difficult from my point of view, because in the government sector, there are a lot of postings and transfers and everything that can happen. And in the private sector, it is more like a stable job where you can choose to do what you want to do. But in the government sector, it is your passion or your interest are not catered for. It is rather what needs to be done. There's the hierarchy and everything which needs to be followed. Also the promotions and based on the number of years of experience that you have, rather than the capabilities that you have in yourself. So yeah, I think this is my point of view on the differences working in the government and the private sector.
Thank you, Harshita. I hope the question is answered. Now here we come to the last question, which is for any of the speaker can take up the question. Any book you would like to recommend on leadership? Hello.
Yeah, I'll give you two suggestions. So there's there's one that's aimed at women. It's called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. I will share with you the author, so you can share with your network. And then the second is a book by Sheryl Sandberg. I'll share with you. But one of the other things that I'd like to add around the books on leadership, sometimes as women, we want to read leadership books by women sharing their experiences. But I think that to understanding how successful men have made inroads into leadership also gives you the perspective of the way through a different lens of looking at the world. And sometimes when you're looking at it from different perspectives, you can get a fresher opportunity.
Thank you, Jessica. So here comes another very interesting question. Some advice for those who haven't entered the corporate world, but yet will soon be part of it. So what are the things we can do prior of it? So any one of the speaker can answer.
Can you repeat the question, Neha, please?
Yes. Some advice for those who haven't entered the corporate world, but yet will soon be part of it.
It's quite a general question. So I try to, corporate world, you mean the engineering sector, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe just try to focus on what's your interest, as I said before, and try to find your way to doing your path, and also your mentor, because yes, it's true that it's important to read books, it's important to study, but also it's important to have a good work environment. And if I can add something about books, I think that it's nice, interesting to read Daniel Goleman. It's emotional intelligence, because I think it's an important element in our career, also to understand people. So developing this kind of intelligence. Thanks.
I would just like to add on what Elisa has said. I mean, before you entering the corporate world, the most basic thing that we need to take care of is just follow our passion and the perseverance. because if we don't find something that we are passionate for, we might not be that successful. So we need to find what we are passionate for, and then we need to be very determined that we follow our dream rather than leaving it in between.
Thank you, Harshita. I hope the question is answered. We don't have any more questions. If anyone else has any question, they can please drop in the Q&A.
Harshita, can I just ask one very simple question to anybody can answer, all of you, probably yourself, but I think I would like Jessica to respond this question. How much you girls or women professionals, you attribute to your success to your sponsor, or you can say your mentor, do you feel that's a role for the sponsor to help you in your career and adjusting your work-life balance, your commitment to the work and your achievement, so that you manage? How much you do that?
Thank you very much for that question. When I think about my role as a graduate, from graduate to professional, and now in senior management, I would say that I attribute a lot more to my mentors than I could have attributed to my own actions. Partly because engineering and the engineering profession is a lot about networks. It's a lot about understanding things that are not something that you could read in a book. It's not something that you could watch a webinar and do a quiz and be able to learn about. So you almost need somebody to take you under their wing. I'm not going to say hold your hand, but the analogy that I'd like to use is the way that I felt my sponsors have been is that they've always been this hand that's been there, that whenever I feel like I'm drowning, that I have a hand to grab onto. And so the role for sponsors is that because you've walked that path before, you know the challenges that exist, and you also are able to know how to respond to things, because when you've responded more than once, it becomes habit. But the first time sometimes scares you, and as someone and as a world, when entering a workforce that doesn't look like you, it's very overwhelming. And so the role of the sponsor is to be able to be that the backup and the support and the champion. And the other role of the sponsor is as a senior person, you get a lot of opportunities, and whether it's to present at a webinar or to present at a client meeting or even to lead a project, sometimes just that opportunity of saying to the person that you're sponsoring, I suggest that you present the presentation. That little bit of belief in another person, it really changes someone's life. And it's those small steps that really makes a difference. So I would say that I would be really set back if I didn't have sponsors who liked me, who had a real desire to see me grow, and who felt like when I'll pay it forward because they've paid it forward to me. So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Great answer.
Thank you, Jessica. Since we don't have any further questions, now we come to the end of today's webinar. Rightly said, work-life balance doesn't come easy. Work and life do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can have both, and you should. With this note, I thank you, audience, speakers, and CI members for taking out time for today's webinar. We look forward for continued association with you in the upcoming events. I request you, the audience, to give their feedback in the chat box and drop in their suggestions on topics they want us to bring it to them in near future. With that, thank you at the 5 minutes. Request for your feedback and suggestions. Thank you all. We will soon be back with another series from Future Leader Forum. Have a great weekend.